Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming out tonight. We'll get started in just a few minutes. We'll probably begin just about 1 minute after the top of the hour, just to give folks an opportunity to log in and make sure their system is working. Thank you for coming out again, and I hope you enjoy the material. Thank you again for coming out. We'll get started in about 1 minute. Thanks for your patience, and thanks for coming out again tonight. Well, hello everyone tonight, and thank you for coming out to the faculty development session for tips for facilitating discussions on sensitive topics. My name is Michael Erwin, and I'm a professor in the multimedia and interactive media department. And tonight I'm going to be talking about just various topics that might help you engage some of the students when you're faced with dealing with certain sensitive topics. There's a handout in the handout area. If you'd like the PowerPoint presentation, you go ahead and download that. And then also for faculty development credit in the chat area, there's a link to an exam. And that'll also be emailed out to you after the presentation so you can get credit for presenting or for participating tonight. And I thank you again for coming out. As we go through the material, if you have questions, just pop those in the questions area and I'll address those at some point throughout the material. And from there, I hope this is something that gives you food for thought for things that you might have faced while facilitating courses. And don't hesitate to ask questions or keep in touch down the road should you have questions later in the event something pops up. So tonight we're going to just start with what is the real reason? Why is this useful? And I think many of us have been faced with discussion topics that are quite interesting. Many times we have discussions that are mainly wrapped around some sort of deliverable, and we don't typically have too in-depth conversations about things that might be a little sensitive. I have embraced a couple of conversations, though, in multimedia or history of multimedia classes where the topic of pornography came up, and this was more in terms or the context of content, but it did actually spark just a flurry of interesting perspectives And as online teachers, I think we're always prepared to deal with most things, but it was interesting to see and somewhat shocking that the variety of perspectives were so wide-ranging that I thought this would be a great topic to share with some folks. So this is useful because at some point we will be faced with a topic that's very sensitive, and although it may not be sensitive to us, there are students that we never know what their background is. So the littlest thing could set them off in terms of looking at a topic really in the wrong perspective. And these topics are really ranging. I just have a few of them there. Things like racism, forced labor or slavery, to bullying, sexual orientation, gender biases. There are many, many others that can come up in a discussion. So that's just a few of them. And it can make you uncomfortable, honestly. And the idea is, of course, you want to be friendly with students and you want to keep the conversation going. But I think that many times the little voice in our head might read something that a student says, and I think we're a little set back or put back. And so we can be uncomfortable even as the most seasoned professors on occasion. And so it's important that we remain calm. It's the natural reaction for those is obviously we kind of shy away from the difficult or controversial topics. And, you know, we might stray from actually hitting the target in such a way that it could be a more meaningful conversation, because in the end, we're here to help and educate and broaden the minds of others. And so really avoiding these topics when they come up is not really helpful, but we want to have some tools on how to approach it. So if we do shy away, the following slides will give us some great insights on how we might approach some of these types of discussions that are a little controversial or a little bit upsetting to some. They're important for students in many cases, some of these topics, because if they're relevant and they're controversial, it does create the awareness of what's going on in the world in various topics. And I list social, moral, political, or civic underpinnings. And as teachers, you know, we can't always be at the top of every topic, but we certainly want to facilitate a conversation to the best of our ability. And students deserve to be taught about these topics in authentic, engaging, and purposeful ways. And that's a pretty important statement, because if we can tackle an assignment that has a discussion that's controversial, I think we can really create a much more enriched conversation and meaningful if we tackle it head on. So following will be a few tips that we might use that you can approach sensitive topics with. And the first is really set the stage. In order for students to express their opinions and participate with sensitive topics, they need to feel safe and not fear retaliation for comments they make. And I think this is something that's, I think most students will be somewhat reluctant to post their honest opinions if the class is a little out of control. Now, I've never had a class where I've had more than a few students that were really extremely edgy, but it can occur. And you want to make sure that you watch for students that might have a habit of attacking others in the discussions. It's best to establish a supportive classroom atmosphere with ground rules for discussions early in the semester. And a lot of times we have these, of course, in policies and some of the student etiquette and netiquette, but I'm not sure students actually read those all the time. So it's important to perhaps reiterate that in your discussions, especially if there is a discussion that you know could potentially be controversial, or at least create some sensitivity. And you can certainly start with an opening thread that just basically reminds students to be friendly, to be supportive, and constructive most of all. And you can say that without actually saying, you know, don't attack others. But you can certainly say that too if you can word it in such a way that sounds rather elegant. But setting the stage is key, because you want students to express their ideas. You don't want them to be afraid or reluctant to express their ideas. Now, I think you get a good handle on the types of students that you've got in the class in the opening introductions. If you see students that are very articulate and honest and share some of their most deepest details about their lives, a lot of times those are the people that will be okay with at least expressing their ideas in a constructive manner. Something interesting is the University of Michigan Center for Research on Learning and Teaching offers these 6 rules to establish an area where you can foster a more productive discussion, and where you'll listen and be respectful and do it without interrupting. One of them is, of course, respect one another's views. And if you see somebody not doing that, you always want to kind of perhaps send them an email, a really friendly one, and with love, of course, in such a way that you explain to them that this is just a learning activity and it's never a personal attack on somebody's individuality. You want to criticize the ideas, but not the individuals. And again, it's okay for people to criticize an idea. That is totally okay, but they want to do it in a constructive manner and never attack the individual posting it. Because if you've ever had a class where students start poking each other, that really gets out of hand quickly, and it's just creates a lot more work for us, but in the end, it's tension for the students, and that could ultimately hinder their learning experience. We don't want that. And we want to commit to the learning and not the debating. And I think that's kind of what I just hinted at, is that debate can occur where people will go back and forth and tell each other that their perspective is correct and the other's is wrong. And we want to avoid that and really just look at the underpinnings of the topic. Avoid blame and speculation, and especially avoid inflammatory language. And as facilitators, we want to watch out for that. And I think most of us has probably seen that at one point or another. Let's hope it doesn't happen all the time. Another one is, of course, for us as instructors, is to know ourselves. Before facilitating a topic that is potentially sensitive, it's important to consider our own biases. And as I created this particular presentation, I was thinking about a controversial conversation I had in a discussion at one point, and I actually had never stopped to think about my own bias about a specific topic, and it was very different than a lot of other people. So as a facilitator, I've kind of have to be aware of what that is. And if I'm confused around something, then I really want to do a little bit more research so that I understand what it is that we're talking about in depth. And it also helps facilitate a little better. If you're not completely clear on a topic, then I think that's important to look at. A recent one I could think of is when people are kneeling at the national anthem, at the football games. And I think many people might be confused about that one. I actually had a conversation in a discussion where that almost started to get off the rails. And I quickly was able to detour it and get people back on track. But it was clear immediately that that was one of those topics that people had a lot of biases about. So I certainly was luckily had been reading about it recently, and so I was better equipped to deal with it. But knowing yourself is key, and you want to know really a deeper thought of what you think about things and what you know about those things. We're all products of our society and culture, and attitudes and values change. And I put that in there because the key to that is students come from just various backgrounds. We've got a very diverse group of students, and you just don't know what their background is. Somebody from overseas could have a very different perspective on something than somebody grew up in California living on the beach. It's just, you just never know. So you also want to know yourself in terms of how you will present the material to those individuals. Now, discussing a moment when your own ideas changed may help the model. It might help model the open-mindedness and conscientiousness, self-reflection that you hope to inspire. So a lot of times people will, instructors will share an idea about something where maybe their perspective was a little off at first, and it changed based on something that they did or read or watched. And that, the stories that people read in classes, I think students really enjoy hearing life experiences or stories. And if they can see that you as an instructor, because of course all students think that we're perfect, just kidding, but they see how we also look at material and how we evolve and how we change, that helps them, I think, kind of calm down and realize that that everybody has a different perspective. So know yourself is key for that particular element. Another one is, of course, recognizing the diversity of your students. And I think that's something that we tend to forget if we facilitate so many classes a year, and we see just a text post from them periodically. Luckily, we have Brightspace now, and we can see pictures of people. And if you're the kind of instructor who will ask students to post a picture of themselves, I think you can get a really good idea of the diversity of the kind of students we have these days. It's key because everybody has a unique background, regardless of their race, and everybody has had different experiences. And even every professor in this classroom, this training, has certainly had a different background. And we all have different perspectives, but I think we all share the same goals, and that we want to educate students and do the best that we can to give them a good learning experience. Diversity is an asset too. The beauty of that is with diversity comes just a variety of wonderful ideas and different perspectives. And with a constructive conversation, we get just a plethora of wonderful ideas and just wonderful perspectives from individuals that can really enrich a conversation. You want to give students the opportunity to express their views and make it a goal to understand, value, and respect the backgrounds and experiences that formed them. So as you have conversations with them, it's always good to put in there, some acknowledgement to whatever it is that they're posting. Acknowledge that whatever they're mentioning is an interesting thing, and it's a positive thing, and of course do it in a strategic manner. That will teach the students to do the same thing. So if you model constructive criticism and are proactive in recognizing a student's background and how interesting it might be, then students will do that as well. Now, again, I note that classroom introductions are key in determining what the student's unique background might be. If you spend a little bit of time on reading those backgrounds and having maybe a conversation initially, it could eliminate some issues later on. I think I've seen many instructors doing some great things with video feedback in terms of having the students do that, post videos about themselves. Those are phenomenal. You can't always get students to do that, but the more you know about a student up front is kind of an indicator of what might occur moving forward depending on a sensitive topic. Some are going to be much more dynamic than others. And so, again, introductions are really key. Spend some time with those, and it'll serve you in the long run. Another one is set a framework and objective for the discussion up front. We have introductory posts, and that's a great opportunity to kind of set the stage, or set the framework, I should say, and the objective for the discussion. And to get the most out of your discussions, you want to do that because you have the opportunity to connect the discussion to the curriculum. And why that's key is it can always just remind the student that, hey, this is just a classroom. We're not attacking individuals or perspectives. We're really trying to teach you, and here's where the curriculum ties in. And that's important. I think initial discussions introductory posts can do that. Initial posts in a discussion can do that. And establishing a framework will also create a focus, and you want to be as detailed as you can. You don't want to write, a volume, but you want to write something that's very specific, gives a framework for the discussion with a specific goal. What is it that we're going to accomplish? And that can help them stay on task, which is really critical. If students stay on task, and a lot of times if you see a student going off the rails, simply indicating that they're a little off task for that and restate what the objective is, that can pull them back in. I think sometimes students are aware that they do get emotional, and that's a great way to go. And stating the objective is, it also gives the students opportunities to engage in the experiences that develop the fair-mindedness and encourage recognition and serious consideration of opposing points of view. And that's pretty deep, the way I've got it written there. I think, again, if we model this initially and we set the stage, we have a good framework for it, and we eliminate some of the forest fires that can occur. And again, we're there to help them have a good learning experience, but we also want them to learn. And so this is a really good tip as well. The next one is provide a common base for understanding. The Center for Research on Learning, again, I love this particular location, this site, suggests assigning readings or showing a video clip about a topic to prompt the discussion. Now, I don't think I've seen too many videos that set up a discussion. Usually it's just an introductory post of some kind or some reading. I think the challenge is a lot of times, do we know if the student is looking at all of the reading, if in fact there is something that creates a common base for this for the discussion? Now, the readings are always very relevant, but since they're about to post, it's always good to post something. Hey, look at this, watch this short video, take a look at this really quick. And what that'll do is kind of get them in the mindset of what it is we're talking about. So they see the perspective of the video, and I think that helps tremendously. Using materials that provide a context for examining diverse perspectives allows students to gain an awareness of others' views as well. And so videos are great. You might not be able to find videos on everything that you're looking for, but it does create an awareness of others' views, and that alone could actually eliminate some of the friction that can occur. The complementary materials will help focus the discussion, though, and that's really a key statement there. it's always good to collect items like that. So if you've had a controversial discussion or a sensitive discussion, or one that you've seen get out of hand, the simplest fix could be, let's set up something in the introductory post that sets the framework, sets the stage, but also use a video clip to somehow prompt the discussion. And I think that creates focus a little bit more. The next one is be an active facilitator. Now, we're all very active here at the Art Institute, and I think I know some of the names on this list here, and I think we have some stellar instructors here, and so we're all very active, and simply being active and involved in the conversation can really mean just a tremendous amount. You don't want to dominate the discussion, but you don't want to passively observe either. You want to be involved. Sometimes that can be as simple as posting a comment or two to other students that are commenting on other students' initial posts. So you're kind of chiming in here and there if you think that it would fit. Here's some tips, though, for intervening in the discussion. Provide reminders about respecting the right of others to have differing opinions. Reword questions posed by students. And I know I've done that quite a bit over the years. It doesn't happen a lot, but I know that's a great way to go, because sometimes the wording on discussions alone can be little eyebrow lifters. And so simply restating it can help quite a bit, or rewording it, I should say. Correct misinformation. If you see somebody who's just full of facts and they're all completely wrong, with love, of course, kind of correct that misinformation and redirect. A good way to go too, with rather than tell somebody they're just blatantly wrong about something, because we don't want to do that, but asking for clarification. Perhaps you say that you're fascinated by the information and you weren't aware of it, and then ask for clarification on whatever it is they're saying. And a lot of times students they'll look at what you're saying, they'll look at what they wrote, and they'll try to verify it. And I've had students come back and say, you know what, I was actually incorrect about that. Thank you for pointing that out. Or, sometimes they don't thank you, they just repost with something that is more accurate, if that makes any sense. Another one is review the main points or expand on the information. So if you see something getting off the rails, it's always good to review the main points with an individual, or simply expand. And I think we all do that. I think most of us as good instructors will look for the opportunities to expand upon any topic, whatever it is, because in the end, the discussion threads are the platform where we teach. We don't have the opportunity to really lecture. We do give feedback quite a bit, but we have such a diverse group of students with differing skills that we always want to give a level of information that expands upon where they are, so that we can teach a little further. So that's a great element to have. And then lastly, make reference to relevant reading materials or course content. Now, course content is awesome because that indicates to the student that here at Art Institute, we create content that is relevant to what's going on. But it's also good to make reference to perhaps some current events or things that are going on right now that maybe the curriculum couldn't have in it because it's rather fresh. And I think there's many opportunities for that as well. So those 6 rules are really, hopefully those are great tips for you to be an active facilitator. They're not all going to come in handy at once, but I think a few of those will come in handy quite a bit. Another one is foster civility, and I think we all do this pretty well. There's a good chance that discussions will become heated, and I've seen that, and again, that's what sparked the idea to create a training like this. I have seen some that were just off the rails, and so I think fostering civility up front is key. You want students to never feel that they're being attacked, and in some cases, the responses to the students that are being the attacker, you probably don't want to redirect them in the discussion itself. You're probably going to want to send them a nice friendly email just to kind of remind them in a private manner. And that way the conversation doesn't go again off the rails. In fact, in the event that they get offended by your comments. So, and that can happen. I think all students are typically here to learn, so it's rare. And make students very aware that it's okay to disagree. But keep the comments focused on the ideas and not the people. I think many people, when they read things in the threads, depending on how it's worded, they look at it and go, "How dare you?" When really the individual writing the comment had no intention of offending anybody. It's just the way they worded it, and somehow it just rubbed an individual the wrong way. And I think if we remind people of that, they kind of come around. It's very similar to text messages that are very short. Sometimes you get a text message, you're like, what the heck did you say? And the reality is they weren't saying anything offensive. It was just how we were reading it. And that's a great way to kind of get students to be aware that they're not being attacked. It was just wasn't written the way that it was clear. So that's another element to think about. So fostering civility is key. And then another one is be prepared to deal with tense or emotional moments. And if we're aware of a sensitive topic coming, then we can certainly just be prepared for that. When discussing sensitive issues or difficult topics, students will get angry and upset. It does happen. Remain calm always and try to turn it into a learning experience. Again, using the previous tips that I've given you can really help a lot. But of course, remain calm. As instructors, we can never be offended, even though in our mind we might personally get offended by something a student says to us. We can never express that. I always tell students or teachers to, when writing discussion threads, to always imagine that they're the happiest person on earth, and it will show in the writing. If you approach a discussion, in a bad mood or offended, sometimes it kind of squeaks through in terms of the message. So it's always good to always turn the things that might be offensive to others, be calm, and turn it into a learning experience. But don't avoid the issue. Defer it until you make a plan for dealing with it if necessary. So if you see something that's going on, then take a moment, perhaps pull this presentation out, think really hard about what it is that you're doing, and then apply it in some case. So certainly stay calm. So from there, I'd like to open it up for just a quick discussion if anybody has ideas to share, and you should be able to unmute your mics, or you can post in the questions area. What are some techniques that you use when dealing with controversial topics to keep the conversation focused and productive? If anybody would like to share their ideas, that'd be great. And you can put that in the chat area, or you can unmute your mic. I'll leave that to you. If anybody has any tips, anything at all. Speaking to the student over the phone, that's a really good idea. And why is that a good idea? Because they hear your voice. I think a lot of times with text messages or discussion threads, they don't hear our tone, our inflection, our sensitivity, our wonderful personalities. And a simple phone call, I think that speaks volumes. So that is actually a great idea. And if you are the kind of instructor who already does make phone calls on a regular basis, you might already have kind of a relationship with your students. So they're used to talking to you. They know how wonderful you are. And so even a text message after a few phone calls, they feel comfortable talking with you. So that's a great idea. Phone calls are great. Any others? Any others? Okay. Phone caller is talking, but for some reason I am not hearing it. So is after be prepared to deal with tense or emotional moments, summarize. And this is a pretty key element at the end of really at the end of any discussion. It's a good idea to summarize because there's so many posts. I know I've got a class right now that has 20 students in it, and I think I saw 100 posts the other day total, and that was initial posts and follow-up posts and follow-ups to the follow-ups. So the conversation was really going a couple of different directions. Now, luckily, this was more of an artifact-based conversation, but summarizing the material, it does a couple of things. It lets you ask students for quick written feedback about the discussion, which you can discuss during the next class. Now, the benefit of that is it reminds the students what you talked about, what was the focus of the particular discussion, and then if you can tie it into what's coming, that's also a great idea. This will help students recall, review, and reflect upon the content of the discussion. Now, this is very powerful stuff. A lot of times students are going so fast and they do a discussion, they participate in a discussion, but they move on so quickly that they never really stop to think about what it was that they just did. And so a lot of times I have seen good examples of at the end of a discussion or at the end of a week, an email goes out or a post is made that just really says, hello class, to summarize the point of this discussion or this assignment or whatever it is, you can just create a bullet list. And I think that really helps students kind of focus on what it is they should have taken away from that particular discussion. If you don't do this now, this is a fun way to go, because also if you email those at the end of the week, and I do that, students, they look forward to it. And then even if a student has missed the week for some reason, they kind of get a recap of what was covered and what the focal point was for that particular week. So that's a great way to go too. And another one that's really key, again, is reflect. Reflecting plays a key role in two ways, and I list them kind of very large so that you can think about it. Encourage students to actively reflect on the comments made by other students, especially those that may disagree. This is a great opportunity for students to really learn new perspectives. And if they're open to learning, if they're open to new ideas, I think this gives them some insights into elements that they may have never even considered before. And that's where the beauty of diversity comes in. With diversity, we have the ability to harness perspectives that we would never have access to. So reflecting plays a key role in that, firstly. Secondly, it leaves time after the discussion for students to record their reflections in writing. And if you allow students to reflect in some way or have them do a summary of some kind, when they write it down, and I think many of us know when students will write material down rather than just talk about it, it tends to sink in a different way. And it could be more meaningful for many to simply write out their reflection. I know a lot of courses right now have a reflection built into them, and it gives the students the opportunity to break out what it is they learned and why it's important. And you can see a lot of light bulbs go on in those conversations where you see them realize, you know, this, oh wow, this is really important, and I just realized it as I was reflecting. The key is, of course, is it's a quieter opportunity for the student to respond and take some time to think about it. And that's the beauty of asynchronous. Also, a chance to unwind and think calmly about the views on the issue. And then lastly, I have a bullet point, ask students to think about whether there are new ideas, opinions, or opportunities for further discussion, awareness, and reflection. And then use their responses to develop extensive activities if you have the opportunity that will build community and support differing viewpoints. Now, since the curriculum is mainly preset, we might not have the opportunity to do much of that, but if you can infuse those ideas into reflection discussion threads, you might have the opportunity to create something a little bit more enriching. And so that's a lot of material at once, and I've kind of created a slide at the end here that kind of tells you more or less a list of things. So in conclusion, set the stage, know yourself, recognize the diversity of your students, set a framework on objective for the discussion, provide a common base for understanding, be an active facilitator, foster civility, be prepared to deal with, and I have a typo there, tense or emotional moments, and summarize and then reflect. And if you apply these elements, I think the key, of course, is the first four. If you do the first four well, I think the other ones are basically just maintenance and allow opportunities for more learning. But these are a great way to go if you have sensitive topics. And from there, I've got this PowerPoint there. There are some references listed in the very last slide, so there's additional reading there if you'd like to explore some of those ideas. And you know, I would love to hear if you have ever dealt with any sensitive topics as we close. Have any instructors on this training ever had a sensitive topic in a discussion that kind of got out of hand, where they think these rules might have helped? Go ahead and post that in the questions area. If you have, if you haven't, well, then you're lucky. You are very lucky. I don't see anyone posting. Okay, well, maybe you've been lucky and avoided the ability to have a tense conversation. So hopefully these will come in handy, and certainly feel free to explore those. If you ever have a tense moment or are needing a little support on any topic that's related to this, feel free to reach out to me. I'm glad to help, and I can certainly share this with you if you happen to lose it down the road. Feel free to download this in the handouts area, and also don't forget to take the short quiz that I've posted in the chat area. And then from there, it's been great having you all tonight. If you have questions, hang out for a few. I'd love to chat with you. Otherwise, thank you for coming out tonight, and it's been great having you. Have a wonderful evening. My pleasure, Eric. Thanks for coming out tonight. The quiz is in the chat area. You should see it. Here, I'll put it in the questions area too. No, I can't do that. There you go. See if you see it in the questions area there. Just put it in the answer column. See that now? Excellent. It's 500 essay questions, so it shouldn't take long. I'm just kidding, of course. Excellent. Well, thanks for coming out tonight. And with that, we'll close on.